This video contains major spoilers for the X-Men's Dark Phoenix Saga and the issues leading up to it. You have been warned. The Dark Phoenix Saga was an X-Men comic book story arc written by Chris Claremont, which revolved around Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force. The story ran 9 issues starting in January of 1980 with Uncanny X-Men 129 and going until October of the same year, ending with Uncanny X-Men 137. The story would have long-lasting effects and can be considered being one of the most important in the whole of the X-Men series. To get a full grasp of the story, it is important to note that the Phoenix didn't make its first appearance until October of 1976 in Uncanny X-Men number 101, just 4 years before the start of the Dark Phoenix Saga and 13 years after the series' original debut in September of 1963. Uncanny X-Men 101 is the final part of a multi-part story where the X-Men find themselves on a space station to stop Stephen Lang, an anti-mutant bigot who created X-Sentinels that were meant to be unbeatable duplicates of the original X-Men, dubbed Project Armageddon. Lang is seemingly killed during the X-Men's attack, as are his Sentinels, though thanks to the fight the space station is damaged along with the X-Men's ship's autopilot. With all escape pods having already been taken, the X-Men are left with no choice but to use their damaged ship to escape, though it is brought to their attention that whoever pilots the ship will be exposed to extreme, deadly levels of radiation. Jean decides to take control of the ship, hoping that her telekinetic shield would protect her from the radiation. Despite the protests of Wolverine, Storm, and even having to use her powers to knock out Cyclops, Jean takes control of the ship as it descends back to Earth, while the other X-Men take shelter in a radiation-shielded room. Jean's powers are put to the ultimate test as she struggles to keep the ship on track while fighting off the radiation. Issue 100 ends on a cliffhanger, which is picked up immediately in issue 101, with the ship crashing into the Hudson River and the X-Men emerging from the water. This is when we get our first appearance of Phoenix, who erupts from the water and utters one of her most famous lines, declaring herself as Phoenix. It wouldn't be until January of 1986, nearly 10 years later, in Fantastic Four 286, that we would find out exactly what happened in those final moments before the ship crashed. The following issues leading up to Uncanny X-Men 129, for the most part, aren't too pivotal to the Dark Phoenix story. That is until about issue 114, where Jean thinks the other X-Men have died, though in reality they have ended up in the Savage Land. Vice versa, Cyclops and the other X-Men think both Jean and Beast died in the issue prior. It is also stated in a conversation between Cyclops and Storm that Scott felt different about Jean since the space shuttle crash back in issue 101, like she was a different person from the one he loved. Nevertheless, Jean, thinking her friends and teammates are gone, takes this hard, and following this, in issue 122, the same issue the X-Men return home, while in Scotland, Jean meets Jason Wagler, also known as Mastermind. Mastermind uses his powers of telepathic illusions to get into Jean's mind, his end goal being to turn her into the Red Queen and have her join the Hellfire Club. The illusions begin in issue 125 with Jean finding herself in the 18th century. Though it only lasts a short time, it would only be the first of many illusions of her living another life in another time. The illusions persist into the following issues, which also serve as a reunion between Scott and Jean. The Dark Phoenix Saga kicks off in issue 129, titled God Spare the Child. Following the conclusion of the last issue, the X-Men are finally back together and on their way back home. Jean and Scott have a heart-to-heart where they not only declare their love for one another, but seem to re-establish their relationship as well. Though, unbeknownst to Scott, moments prior to their conversation, Jean had once again been in the illusionary world created by Mastermind. This issue not only re-establishes Jean and Scott as a couple, but marks the return of Professor Xavier to the team, though that reunion is bittersweet, with Scott and the Professor butting heads on how the X-Men should be led. Issue 129 also formally introduces us to the Hellfire Club, and most notably 2 of its members, Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost, the White Queen. It is revealed that the Hellfire Club has tapped into Cerebro and has been spying on the X-Men. When Cerebro alerts Charles of two New Mutants, the Hellfire Club decides to intervene. The X-Men decide to split up into two teams and make contact with the New Mutants. Charles, Storm, Colossus, and Wolverine go off to encounter a young girl who's been having intense headaches. Her name, Kitty Pryde, and we learn that her power is to phase through solid objects. Emma Frost is the first to make contact with the young mutant, but fails in even talking to her, leaving her parents with brochures to her quote-unquote school. As she leaves, the X-Men arrive, and are able to convince Kitty to go out for ice cream with Storm, Colossus, and Wolverine, while the professor speaks to her parents. During their stay at the restaurant, they are attacked by the Hellfire Club. Kitty is able to escape thanks to her powers, but the others are caught off guard by the White Queen's psychic attack and are captured. Issue 130, titled Dazzler, follows Scott, Jean, and Kurt, who are unaware of their teammate's situation. The trio arrive at a nightclub where the second of the New Mutants is said to be, but once again, the Hellfire Club have beaten them to the punch and are already closely monitoring them from a nearby van. As the three search the club, Kitty Pryde searches for the kidnapped X-Men, who she finds but is unable to free and is sent running for her life once again. Meanwhile, Jean is put back into another illusion where she is declared the Black Queen and married to Jason. She is snapped out of this illusion by Scott, who finds her kissing Jason in the nightclub, though she doesn't know what's going on and Jason is able to slip out unnoticed. Without being given time to explain, Dazzler takes to the stage, wowing everybody with her mutant powers that put on a light show and the crowd goes wild. Outside, Kurt answers a phone call from an unknown person claiming that the X-Men have been kidnapped. This person, of course, being Kitty Pryde, who was able to get the phone number from Storm before having to flee. Inside, the club is attacked and Jean and Scott are nearly taken out when Dazzler steps in, saving them both. Nightcrawler joins in the fray, and together they take out the Hellfire Club's minions and head off to save their friends, while an overjoyed Jason watches as they speed off. Issue 131, Run for Your Life, opens with Kitty Pryde being chased down by the Hellfire Club. Thankfully, Phoenix arrives in time to save her, smashing the car chasing her to bits. This worries Scott, not the fact that she overused her powers, but the fact that she shows little to no remorse to the would-be killers. After a conversation with Kitty and a telepathic look inside one of the killer's minds, Jean is shocked to learn not only about the Hellfire Club, but of the modern-day Jason Wagner. This is significant because up to this point, Jean had thought that all the delusions she's been having have been of an ancestor in a past life. Not only that, but the Jason she married in those delusions was also a member of the Hellfire Club. Giving it no more thought but to herself, the team then form a plan. Phoenix uses her powers to restore the car she crushed earlier, and though not directly explained if Sal, one of the members of the Hellfire Club, is under her mind control or not, he drives what looks to be an unconscious Dazzler, Scott, Jean, and Kurt to the front gates of the Hellfire Club. Meanwhile, using her powers, Kitty breaks in through the back and frees Wolverine, though she takes a full-on blast by one of the Hellfire Club's henchmen, knocking her out, leaving a not-so-happy Wolverine. Back in the front of the building, Dazzler uses her powers to blow the top off of the car, and thus ensues the attack on the Hellfire Club itself. Once inside, the team splits up. Cyclops, Dazzler, and Nightcrawler take on the club's henchmen, while Phoenix comes face-to-face with the White Queen. While they engage in battle, Cyclops and the others make contact with Wolverine and the now freed Colossus and Kitty. Elsewhere, Storm watches as the White Queen and Phoenix go head-to-head, though it becomes apparent that Emma Frost is no match for the power of the Phoenix, and in a stunning display, Jean takes her out along with the building. Cyclops rushes to the site, but another explosion knocks him back, revealing Phoenix and Storm safe and sound. This issue comes to an end with Kitty being reunited with her parents. Her father, who at first is angry, quickly calms down. Scott confronts Jean about this, asking if it is her doing. She admits to it, acting like it's no big deal. Storm, on the other hand, is somewhat worried and confides in Scott about how fierce the Phoenix powers seem to be, though the two decide to brush it off and not think about it any further. The first 3 issues of the Dark Phoenix Saga alone can be considered some of the most important to the X-Men series as a whole. Not only because of the introduction of the Hellfire Club and Sebastian Shaw, but most importantly the introduction of Kitty Pryde, who would later go on to become Shadowcat, a great leader and mentor to New Mutants. and Emma Frost, who herself would become a member of the X-Men and a future love interest to Scott Summers. And let's not forget about Dazzler. Although not as popular as the others, Dazzler has gone on to have her own series, and at one time or another, has joined both the X-Men and S.H.I.E.L.D. Regarding the story, although we do get to see Jean and Scott reunite as a couple, we are also given a reminder of what the Phoenix powers can do. Destroying a car and fixing it with ease, and withstanding an explosion that would leave most, if not all others, dead. Not to mention her, at times, careless attitude mixed with the unstability of her mind, thanks to Mastermind solutions, are slowly starting to come to a head. Join me next time as we look into the final confrontation between the X-Men and the Hellfire Club, as well as the birth of the Dark Phoenix herself.